Father, we thank you for your wonderful grace to us. We thank you that you love us and you care for us, that we are on the top of your mind, that you have us in your heart. You have us on your mind. You have a plan for us, a purpose for us. And sometimes when we're in the midst of school, in the midst of all the turmoil and the busy schedules, we wonder if you remember us. But Lord, we know you do, and we thank you for that.
Yeah.
And Father, as we enter this class on conflict management, vital, vital, vital to our lifestyle and to our homes and to our ministries. Speak to us and teach us what we need to know and understand, and we thank you for that. And we honor you for it and give you praise for it in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Okay, now I mentioned that it was a vital class. And let me tell you how vital I believe this class is. And I think I mentioned this in the marriage conference when I was announcing this class. But I've been a pastor for almost 50 years. I've been a presbyter. I've been an executive presbyter. And when I was executive presbyter, I was the liaison between about 400 churches and the district office. Well, no, 200 and some church, 250, and the district office. And so sometimes when a church was having problems, the district would ask me to go in and meet with the board, meet with the pastor, meet with the people, whatever the situation was, to try to mediate the problems. And after gaining skill in a couple things, I am convinced that 90% of most pastors' problems are because of two things. Number one, a lack of understanding personalities. Because until you understand personalities, you're not putting, well, let me say it this way. I used to think my most important job as a pastor was getting all the people in the church on the same bus, so to speak. I didn't realize that I needed to get them in the right seats on the bus.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay? And the way you get them in the right seats on the bus is one major way is to understand personalities.
Yeah.
Because if you don't understand personalities, we dealt with this in the marriage class on Friday night. If you don't understand personalities, you're setting people up for failure because you're putting them in positions they are not prepared to minister in.
Yeah.
Sets them up for failure, and what they end up doing is leaving the church because they feel like a failure. Okay? And while I'm thinking about this, if you took the marriage and family class and you missed one of the sessions, the Friday night or Saturday, we are going to get them on YouTube so that you can watch that. You'll need to in order to finish the class. So I'm convinced that 90% of a pastor's problems are due to not understanding personalities, number one, and number two, not knowing how to manage conflict. I believe that if a pastor or a spiritual leader of any kind will gain skill in personalities and conflict management, 90% of their problems will go away, won't even be there. In other words, I believe a lack of skill in those areas brings on the problems. So I really believe in this course.
Yeah.
The second reason I believe in this course, and I'm going to be very vulnerable with you right now. Second reason I believe in this course is because I was a pastor for many years and hated conflict.
Amen.
And that's a hard job. It's hard enough to be a pastor when you're not afraid of it, but when you fear it and run from it, it's doubly hard. Because a church is full of conflict. Why?
People.
It's full of people. And so I ran from conflict. And here is how I would do it. I would say, well, I know I need to deal with that person and that situation, but I'm not going to do it today. I need to let it simmer down a while. And in the back of my mind, what I was thinking was maybe it'll go away. Doesn't go away, it just gets bigger.
Oh
Yeah.
my. Yeah. So good.
Couple that with this. Now listen carefully. We're tracking somewhere here. And I told you I'm being vulnerable. See, you can tell on yourself when you're no longer there. It caused problems in my home and in my marriage. Because my wife saw me operate that way and wanted me to man up. And she lost respect for me because I wasn't dealing with the things that needed to be dealt with. Couple that with the fact that sometimes she would then hit it head on and she would deal with it. And then everybody would say she wears the pants in the family. You following where I'm going with this? When it all revolved around the fact that I had a fear of conflict. Now, why did I have a fear of conflict? The way I was raised. We're all raised with a predominant conflict mode in our home. We're going to be talking about that probably at the end of the lecture tonight. We're all raised with a predominant conflict mode. That's the way we tend to deal with conflict, the way our parents did, even if we don't want to. Why? That's what we know. That's what we're comfortable with. Yeah. In my case, the way I dealt with conflict was to avoid it because I was the stepson in the family, the only child that was not from both parents, and my word never meant anything anyway. And so I started stuffing it and shying away from any conflict. I'd been in ministry many years with this problem. And when I was getting my Master of Divinity, I took this course that I'm going to be teaching you. Now, I learned a lot more than I'll have time to share with you, but we've got more time together too as time goes on. But I took that course and it changed my life, changed my ministry, changed my marriage. And here's one of the major ways it changed things. If something would happen on Sunday that I know needed to be dealt with, rather than say, well, in 3 weeks I'll approach them. On Monday, I made a phone call. And I called the person and I set up a meeting for like Thursday or Friday to give me a few days to process it and to deal with it, but I at least had the appointment on the calendar. And I knew it was coming so I could prepare for it. Secondly, the paradigm I'm going to share with you in just a few minutes here about a different way of looking at conflict changed my thinking from fearing it to not enjoying it, but at least recognizing its benefits. Because where there is no conflict, there is no growth. And we're going to talk about that in just a few minutes. And when I realized that conflict promotes growth, all of a sudden I realized this is a natural part of life that I need to embrace and not run from. Okay? So, what I want to do is I want to begin with the syllabus here. We're going to go over the syllabus. And I don't have PowerPoints tonight for most of my teaching, so you're going to be taking notes, but I do have the syllabus here that we can go over, and I'm going to go over it, read it in great detail here. This course relates theories about conflict between persons, within communities, and among organizations to the life of the church. Such issues as the nature of human differences, the constructive values and use of conflict, the biblical and theological understanding of conflict, styles of conflict management, and organizational handling of conflict will be considered. Conflict is not a word that immediately brings to mind wonderful pictures. When we think of conflict, we tend to think of anger, frustration, hurt, arguing, violence, and struggle. I'll never forget one time I was teaching a class for the King's University. And at the beginning of the class, I asked a question because it was a longer class, so I was able to do more things. And I asked a question, and here was the question. When you think of conflict, what does that bring to your mind? Well, anger, frustration, hurt. One kid spoke up and said, beatings. And some of the other students started laughing. I said, whoa, 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 whoa. That's what it means to him. Because that's how he lived it. So when you think of conflict, it conjures up all kinds of emotions.
Yeah.
Okay? And that's because we don't understand conflict. We don't know what to do with it when we encounter it, and we certainly don't seek it out. Regardless of how we view conflict, however, it is encountered with great regularity in Christian ministry. And therefore, effective conflict management is a necessary skill to possess. Within this course, we hope to destroy your negative perceptions about conflict. We'll examine what conflict is from biblical and sociological perspectives, examine our styles of managing conflict, and we'll examine what the Bible has to say about relationships and conflict from a new perception of conflict. We'll begin to develop a paradigm for managing conflict from the perspective of opportunity and ministry. An opportunity for growth, peace, and understanding how to minister to others struggling with conflict. Along the way, we'll develop the skills of conflict management, listening, understanding, negotiating from principles, relationship building, and ministering through mediation. Meets both the school's core curriculum requirements as well as credentialing requirements for the assemblies. Upon successful completion of this course, individuals will be able to, number one, understand conflict, relationships from a conflict management and a biblical perspective, understand their own predominant style of managing conflict, and develop a strategy for enhancing their ability to manage conflict within their personal lives. Develop skills in listening, understanding, relationship building, negotiating, and mediating from a conflict management paradigm. Gain an appreciation for and perception of conflict management that reflects an opportunity for ministry. And understand how to integrate conflict management into their personal lives and ministries. By the way, aren't you guys proud of me that I've got Apple Pay on my phone?
It comes on it, Doctor.
It comes on it, but I didn't know how to do it. I just figured out how to do it about 3 weeks ago when I was on my trip and needed some money.
I am actually proud of
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
Not a lot of people use it, so
Yeah.
I love you for that.
Yeah.
It's too easy to just text somebody money.
And then yesterday I needed to do something with Zelle. Is that what it's called?
Zelle.
I couldn't figure that one out. I wanted to transfer money from one bank to another, and I couldn't figure out how to do it. So I'll have you guys help me. Required reading. Everybody's been asking me what book. I used to require this book, okay? Wesley Pinkham's book, which I have here, Creative Conflict Management. This guy was my professor. He's the one that taught me, and he wrote a book on it. But it's hard to get the books because I have to order them. He has to print them. He has to send them to me. So he's got not all of it, but a majority of this at that location, shilohuniversity.edu/creative conflict management. And that gives you the majority of the course. Okay, so that's all I'm going to ask you to do. It's going to be free to you. All you have to do is pull it up, and you'll get some of it there. The rest of it you're going to be hearing from me, and you'll take notes on. Okay, and then we got a conflict management instrument. That instrument you take, and it shares with you how to determine what your predominant conflict management style is. Uh-oh.
Run.
And I usually teach on the styles and then have you take it either at home or here. But I'm seriously considering just having you take it tonight so that you'll take it without knowing which one you want to try to fit into.
Ooh, that's a good idea. 'Cause I'll figure that one
Because
out.
sometimes people try to fit into the one they think they should be.
Brad, you just deal with it right now.
So we'll probably do it first. Doesn't take too long.
Dr. Cook, have you ever taken the Enneagram test?
I haven't taken that.
You should take it.
I will. I will. You can give me the information on it and I'll take it.
Okay.
Then here's some recommended textbooks. You don't have to have these, but just some textbooks if you'd like to read further on it or build your library. That'll be on the syllabus. I'm going to send you this syllabus. I'll put it on the email so you don't have to write all those down. Course requirements, course attendance and participation. Since this is a 5-week intensive course, the student is to be present, expected to be present in class and prepared for each class session. Then we're going to talk about the assignments. There's going to be some exams. Course attendance and participation is 10% of your total grade. Just being here and acting like you're interested gets you 10%. Okay? Exams, 40%. It'll be 40% of your grade, your exam. Only one exam. Personal conflict journal. And I need to go over this slowly because not everybody, a lot of people foul this up. Each student is required to keep a journal of the conflicts they encounter during the 5 weeks of the course. I want you to get a little journal book, okay? Or a little notebook, or, so it's all together. I want you to keep a journal of the conflicts that you encounter during the 5 weeks of the course. In other words, let's say that you're walking out of here tonight and I said something you didn't like. You're going to jot that down in your journal, just in 1 or 2 sentences. And then you get home and Isaac kicks the dog. And Katrina gets mad and she writes down in hers, I got mad at Isaac because he kicked the dog. I better not say that. I'll start calling you Isaac.
You'll believe it.
That last night I said that. Yesterday I said that at the church. I called him Isaac.
I think you were just.
But you know what? I realized it, didn't I? I realized I didn't say that right. While this journal is to record all conflicts encountered during this course, unless there's hundreds of them, the student is required to choose 3 of those conflicts and write a 3-paragraph paper on each of those 3.
I have to go.
1 paragraph will explain what is at stake. In other words, what's the issues? And you'll know more about issues a little later. The second will describe why is it important to manage or resolve the conflict. And the third paragraph will explain how I did it. So your journal is going to have all your conflicts, bullet points or whatever. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, however you want to do it. And then you're going to choose 3 of those. And for each of those 3, you're going to write 3 paragraphs. 1 paragraph explains what is at stake or what are the issues here. The second paragraph will describe why is it important to manage or resolve it. And the third will explain how I did it, rightly or wrongly. So it's really not that big of an assignment when you think. People look at it. Pardon me?
3 separate papers, right?
No, not necessarily. You can do it right in the journal. You can just take the journal and bullet point all of them. And then the next, after you've done all that and you start on it, take the first one. You could say number 10 and put what it was. And then your 3 paragraphs on it. And then go to the next one and your 3 paragraphs on it. Okay? Then you're going to get 10%. That's 20% of your grade. 10% is for reading the entire, I had textbook. It's going to be the PowerPoints that you're going to be looking at online. And number 5, then you're doing a 5-page paper on the following. And this is what the 5-page paper is on. A personal reflection on the Thomas Kilmann Conflict Management Profile scores, the scores of your assessment. Answering the following questions about that. What was your predominant style? What did you learn from the instrument? Do you agree with the results of the instrument? Why or why not? You may not agree with it. That's okay. And the second part of your 5-page paper is a personal reflection on how you have viewed and handled conflict in the past, citing specific examples where you have had positive outcomes and negative outcomes. Also examine how your family, that should be of origin, family of origin, managed conflict within the family and how this contributed to your predominant style. And then state how your views of conflict have changed from this course and how you intend to integrate them into your personal life and ministry. Now, I already know some of you are worried about that assignment because it can be painful. Or it can even, you might say, well, I don't want to talk about mom and dad or whatever. This is just for me. Nobody else is going to see it. I'm not going to tell anybody about it. You just need to be able to write about it. Okay? And so when you've been in ministry as long as I have, you don't let negative things influence your attitude towards people.
Yeah.
You know why? We've all got them. We've all got them. Okay? So you can see that that's really a simple paper to write because I've told you how to do it right there. And that the hardest part of that paper is going to be keeping it to 5 pages. Double space. It's always double space. Okay?
Dr. Cook, is there a format for the paper that you are specific on?
Right there. That's the format. You'll just start out by writing about your Thomas Kilmann conflict management and your feelings about it. You'll go into your personal reflection on how you dealt with conflict in the past, and then you're going to go into your views, how your views have changed, and how you intend to integrate them into your personal life and ministry. You can use those as headings if you want to, but you don't have to. I just want to see all that in it.
Do you want that MLA?
No. Just from your, it's a personal, it's a very experiential personal paper. Okay? Late work, I will accept late work, but it's a reduction of your grade by a letter grade. And plagiarism, you don't want to, you're not going to do much plagiarism in this class. And all of that is just normal stuff. You're expected to be at class, especially when there's only 5 classes. You're expected to be here every time. If sometime you can't, I mean, once in a while you can miss one maybe, but you can always watch the recording then. If you're really sick and you can't come, but you don't want to miss it, you can go on Zoom and watch it. Yes.
So, as an example, I know, I'm not sure about any of the other interns, but me and Devin have a junior high event out of town that we're running at the time of class. Would that be an exception? Or
Well, it's going to have to be.
because it's like, well, I'm sure.
Right.
I didn't know if you were going to record it, so
Yeah.
are we?
It's going to have to be. One of the things you have to understand about and this is I'm glad you brought this up, Sierra. One of the things you have to understand about the melting of internships and school is a lot of times there can be problems. And like what we have done, I teach for School of Urban Missions, SUM. And one of the things we've had to put on the syllabi, because we have 700 students and they're all interns and they all, things like this are not excused absences in that school. Because if so, people would be gone all the time and there would be no respect for the classroom. I'm not saying that to get on you guys. I'm trying to share what we're going to have to do as we move along is as a group respect the different things. In this sense, it's already set up. You're going to have to do it. It will be recorded and you can watch it. Okay? Good. Any questions? Any other questions or comments? You can tell this is a simple class. Yes.
In the journal, the conflict journal where we write down the conflict that we faced, do you also want us to put in how we resolved it, or just the conflict that we had?
Just the 3.
In the journal?
In the journal. The journal, you're writing down every one. Don't have to put anything about it other than
Just
I had this
conflict.
conflict.
Okay.
Then when you pick 3, that's when
That's
you're
when
gonna.
we put the resolution.
Yeah.
Got it.
Okay.
Will you be reading it as well, or just
I'll be reading it.
on the whole journal?
Yeah, I'll flip through it. I won't read it in any great. Yeah. Yes. Give it to me. Okay.
For real?
Please what?
Don't judge me.
I
Makes
won't judge you.
It's bad.
I won't judge you. And I won't tell on you.
He calls Pastor Kyle. Give him all our journals.
You'd be surprised at some of the journals I've seen. And a lot of the conflict in many of those journals revolved around their spiritual leaders. And here's why.
I believe it.
Not all spiritual leaders are spiritual.
Wow. That's a good word.
And not all of them have your best interest at heart. Hey, let me talk about that for a minute. We're talking about conflict, right?
Yeah.
How many of you have read, and I've seen it in the intern room here, so hopefully most of you have, A Tale of Three Kings?
Mm-hmm.
If you've not read A Tale of Three Kings, you need to. And everybody in ministry should probably read it once a year. And one of the questions that is in that book is, how do you know when you're under a Saul or somebody who throws spears? I don't agree with his answer. His answer is, only God knows and he's not telling. I disagree with that answer. Sometimes God doesn't have to tell me. I can see it. I can feel it. The spears hurt.
Yeah.
Okay? I know why he was saying that. He didn't want people to abuse the concept
Yeah.
by just calling everything spiritual abuse. But here's the thing about being in a ministry where a leader does not have your best interest at heart and just wants to use you and throw spears. I'm always getting students ask me, I know none of you have that problem. I'm just talking about it now because sometime you will have it. Students are always asking me, what do I do when my leader is throwing spears? You have to do one of two things. You have to learn how to duck, or you have to learn how to leave.
Wow.
And the answer as to whether you should leave or not is not as visible and as easy as it seems. Because sometimes God has you with a leader like that to teach you things you could learn no other way as to how not to lead.
Yeah.
So what you have to do is you have to go to God and say, God, am I here to learn something or can I go? And here's one of the reasons, and I agree with what your author says in Tale of Three Kings. One of the reasons sometimes we're under a Saul is for God to get the Saul out of us.
Wow, that's so good.
And so sometimes we're there for a purpose. A painful experience, but it's a purpose. So, and that was all free, but that's some good stuff. Any other questions on this? Okay. You know what? I'm going to do something. I just realized Ginny is on, and I can't get her the conflict management mode assessment right now, and I don't want her to just be sitting there. So I'm going to ask you guys to promise me something. That after we go over these modes and then we take the assessment, you won't try to skew the assessment. Will you promise me?
I don't know if I can do that.
Will you promise me?
I promise you I will try. My
Okay.
best.
Okay. So we're going to do it that way.
I sent you that other test.
Thank you. Okay, so let's get started here. And you'll want to take notes on some of this because some of this stuff will be life-changing material for you.
Will you email us that test?
I'm going to I think I've got enough copies of it right now, but I will also email it. So we want to share a vision for peacemaking and a fascination with conflict management. And we've already talked about the fact that it's not something that brings to mind wonderful pictures. I want to stop that. There we go. Brings to mind wonderful pictures. But conflict is encountered with great regularity in ministry. In fact, the more you do for the Lord, the more conflict will come. Okay? And therefore, creative conflict management is a necessary skill set in order to have staying power. The problem with some pastors is they go from place to place to place. It used to be that pastors moved every 1.8 years.
Wow.
Now we have such a mobile society that they don't have to move that quick. The congregation moves. But it used to be we didn't have that mobile of a society, so pastors would leave every 1.8 years. Why? Because that's about the time conflict rises.
Yeah.
Somewhere between the first and second year, real conflict raises its head. I remember years ago when I pastored in the Bay Area, I had been at that church, probably about 14, 15 months. It had been like heaven. It was a honeymoon. It had been like heaven. And one morning, I went into the kitchen of the church to pour me a cup of coffee. And as I did, I heard the voice of the Lord, and he said, the honeymoon is over. And before that day was over, all hell had broken loose in that church.
Oh, no.
Okay? And so that's why every 1.8 years pastors left. They didn't know how to deal with conflict, and they didn't want to deal with conflict. It was easier to pack up and leave. Okay? So if you want to have staying power, and you want to have longevity, and by the way, churches are built with longevity. And you want to have longevity, you're going to have to learn how to manage conflict. Okay? And in fact, let me give you another stat. If pastors, let's say it's now every 3 years, the pastors leave. I don't know what the stat is. Let's say it's every 3 years. Do you know how long it usually takes for a new pastor to become the pastor of a church?
15 years.
5 years. And if it takes 5 years for a pastor to become the pastor, and pastors leave every 1.8 to 3 years, guess who's not getting pastored?
The church.
I mean, just think about it.
Great chat.
Just think about it. So we want to see conflict as an opportunity for growth and peace, and for understanding how to assist others struggling with conflict. See what I have time for and what I don't have time for here. Yeah, let me talk about this for a minute. I don't always do this, but the problem with most churches is when they should be a covenantal community, they become a contractual community. And we need to understand that what we need is covenantal leadership instead of contractual leadership. What do I mean by covenantal leadership? We should be able to walk in such community and in such a covenant relationship that we don't have to, in our society, I'm talking about even in society, used to be a man's word was his bond. A handshake was all the contract you needed because people were covenantal people.
Mm-hmm.
Nowadays, do we not hear sometimes, don't ever go into business with a Christian?
Yeah.
Now, while I understand that we need contracts so that we can take care of ourselves because we don't live in a covenantal society any longer, we need to get back to some covenantal principles.
Yeah.
And when we learn how to manage conflict, we're getting back into a covenantal system. Society is a group of people who are bound together by laws and regulations. Our society is no longer bound together by relationship, but by laws and regulations. And most churches are no longer bound together by relationship, but they're bound together by laws and regulations. Isn't that a shame? Yeah. That is a shame. Communities not bound together by law. And what's happened is we've collapsed into a society rather than a community. As a church, we've collapsed into a denomination / organization rather than a community. And we need to be careful of that. As leaders, you can't build a church organized as a society. It won't work. It has to be a community. So we want to see conflict as a relational tool. A Japanese proverb says, conflict reveals the soul. Conflict reveals the soul. Now listen to this. The Chinese symbol for crisis. You ever seen those Chinese words? All those symbols? The Chinese symbol for crisis, C-R-I-S-I-S, is composed of two picture characters. The one means danger, and the other means opportunity.
Wow.
It symbolizes that opportunity and danger approach and progress hand in hand, and one cannot be had without the other. You can't have opportunity without some danger. The Apostle Paul talked about the ministry of reconciliation, 2 Corinthians 5:18. And right after it, he gave a sobering statement of ministry-related costs in chapter 6 of 2 Corinthians verses 3 through 10. We're to commend ourselves as ministers of reconciliation to God in tribulations, in needs, in distresses, in stripes, etc. And this balanced presentation of the paradox of conflict, its costs and its rewards, is precisely what I said Japanese symbol, didn't I? I meant Chinese symbol. It's a Chinese symbol. I can't tell the difference between the two.
Dr.
I can't read it.
Oh my word.
I can't read it. So is conflict good, bad, or neutral?
Bad.
Bad, neutral, good. Is it good, bad, or neutral?
Neutral.
It's neutral. It's neither good nor bad. It's how you manage it or fail to manage it that determines whether it's good or bad. Just like money.
Wow.
Money's neither good nor bad. It's how you manage it that determines whether it's good or bad. Okay? So I'm going to give you 5 benefits of conflict, and I guarantee you this will be on your exam.
There's 5 benefits.
5 benefits of conflict. Number 1, conflict promotes growth. When you begin to realize that conflict promotes growth, you don't shun it as hard because you realize it's an opportunity. Let me give you an example of this one before I move on. When I pastored the church in the Bay Area, I had a board member that I jokingly called the board member from hell because he always gave me conflict. And he always chose the other side. And we were constantly butting heads. And I'll never forget, I had walked through thing after thing after thing with him. And I'm going to give you 2 illustrations of things that happened after I went to this conflict course and changed my way of dealing with things. One week we were going to have a board meeting, and I had heard that he was on the warpath again. So I thought, I don't want to deal with that in the board meeting. I'm just going to bring him into my office and deal with it during the week and try to take care of this. So I called him into my office and called him by name, and I said, well, first, I was preparing for that. I was writing all this stuff down, and the Lord spoke to me. He said, what are you doing? I said, I'm getting ready. I'm loading my guns. And the Lord said, no, you're not. He said, just bring him in and let him talk. So I brought him in, and I said, I understand that you're upset about a decision I made. And I shared what the decision was, because I'd heard about it through heard it through the grapevine. And I said, I'm just going to let you tell me why you're feeling that way. And I'm not going to interrupt. And he started, and he went on for about 20 minutes. But the more he talked, the more I understood where he was coming from. And when he got through, I said, you know what? I said, if I only had access to the information you have, I would disagree with my decision too. But now let me tell you some information you don't have. And I said, I can't share it all with you because I won't share the person's dirty laundry. But as a board member, I can share some more with you than you know. And so I shared some of it, and when I got through, you know what he said? I can understand why you made that decision. And what happened? We grew closer together. We grew closer together. Conflict promotes growth. And when you recognize that, and you recognize, like according to that Chinese symbol, that there can be no growth without conflict, all of a sudden you realize we need some conflict. Yeah. If we don't have any conflict, nobody's involved. Nobody's invested. Nobody's going anywhere.
That's right.
Nobody's buying in. Because when you buy in, you tend to want to have a say-so about some things.
Yeah.
Isn't that true?
Yeah.
So first conflict is, number one, it promotes growth. First benefit. Number two, it stimulates the development of values. It stimulates the development of values. Number three, it sets boundaries and creates a sense of identity. It sets boundaries and creates a sense of identity. Number four, it energizes a search for new solutions. It energizes a search for new solutions. And number five, it develops character and wisdom, and you become problem solvers. Develops character and wisdom, and you become problem solvers. So I'll go over them quickly again in case you miss a word or two. Promotes growth. Number two, stimulates the development of values. Number three, sets boundaries and creates a sense of identity. Number four, energizes a search for new solutions. And number five, develops character and wisdom, where you become problem solvers. When you realize all that, all of a sudden you think, conflict's not that bad. It has a purpose. It has a purpose. So here's the point. When we talk about it like this, we can sense in our heads that conflict is okay. But in our gut, we hate it. Why is that? There's a lot of reasons. Sometimes it's because of our history, what we have faced in conflict. Sometimes it's bad theology that we're hearing from the pulpit. What do I mean by bad theology? It could be things like, here's bad theology. It's wrong to get angry.
Yeah.
That's not true. In fact, the scripture says, be angry and sin not. We're going to talk about anger in one of these sessions. Jesus got angry. God got angry. So bad theology says it's bad to get angry. And so we think we're bad Christians when we get angry. Sometimes we need to get angry, but not sin. Right? So there's all kinds of reasons that we can avoid conflict, but none of them are good reasons. So I'm going to share with you a parable now. And if you get this parable, you get the center of conflict management. I'm sharing it the first night, and I don't want you to forget this. If you get this, you really get what conflict management's about. However, that doesn't mean you don't come the next few nights, 'cause I'll give you more. It's called the parable of the orange. If I had an orange at home, I would have brought it today. You got an orange? Give me your orange. I'll give it back to you. Of course, I do love oranges. It's a little orange?
Good.
Tangerine.
That's
Okay.
Yeah, is it gonna work?
It'll work, but that's okay. You can keep it.
Throw it.
But because it's fine. I got an orange here, okay?
What's the difference between
No,
an
it's fine.
orange and a tangerine?
Tangerine's smaller. No, they taste different too. They're just a little different. I don't know.
I was looking at what-
Tangerines they're sweeter. Tangerines are sweeter. Have you had those little cuties, they call them?
Yeah, yeah.
Those are good. Okay,
I heard you.
we're going to talk about the orange. Is it an orange? Is it a gift? In other words, would I give it to you? A paradigm, a map, a parable, or all of the above? We're going to talk now about the parable of the orange. And here's the parable of the orange. A mother heard her daughters fighting in the kitchen. Now just track with me on this. World War III was going on in the kitchen. And she walked into the kitchen to find out why her daughters were fighting. And they were fighting because there was one orange and they both wanted it. So mom grabs the orange, says, give me that orange. She's frustrated. Takes the orange, gets a knife, goes whack, cuts it in two, gives one to this daughter, one to that daughter, says, there, now it's solved. Walks out of the kitchen. A few minutes later, she walks back past the kitchen and she hears them fighting again. She goes back in and says, now what's the problem? And she found out that one daughter wanted the peel to make an orange cake, and the other wanted the pulp to make orange juice. Had she found out what their interests were, instead of dealing with the issue, she would have solved the problem. We are programmed to deal with the issues, are we not? Have you ever heard this? We've got an issue. Right?
Daily.
Daily?
Yeah.
We're programmed to deal with issues when we need to be dealing with interests. And instead of functioning from issues to interests, we need to be functioning from interests to issues. See, the daughters had different interests. One daughter wanted the pulp, the other wanted the peel. Mom framed the problem in terms of an issue. And by the way, this will be on your exam, issues, interests. Mom framed the problem in terms of an issue. There's only one orange. Who gets it? The position taken by each daughter was that each should get the orange for her own ends, her own purpose. But the Apostle Paul says, let each of you esteem and look upon and be concerned for not merely his own interests, but also for the interests of others. Philippians 2:4 out of the Amplified Bible. So what's the point? if we work the issues from the interests, you got to keep tracking here. If we work the issues from the interests, which are the needs, the goals, or the vision, we don't get locked into positions that cause strife. Have you ever seen people get locked in a position?
Yeah.
And it caused strife. But if we work from the interests to the issues, they won't get locked in positions. When we work from the interests of the people, I'm going to use some terminology that are not really words, but you'll get the understanding here. If we work from the interests, we are evaluating who-ness. But if we work from positions or issues, we're validating whatness. And people are more important than things or positions. So if we work from the interests, we're validating people, who-ness. If we work from the issues, we're validating whatness. And we're putting more value on things than we are people. And principles than we are people. And the church tends to buy into a view of reality as a relationship to things, rules, and regulations in order to be valued, accepted, and loved. I'm going to say that again, and then I'm going to clarify it. The church tends to buy into a view of reality as a relationship to things, rules, and regulations in order to be valued, accepted, and loved. If we're not careful, here's what the church says without saying it. If you look like we think you should look, and if you act like we think you should act, and if you treat us like you think we should treat us, then we will accept you.
Mm-hmm.
When we need to accept people just like they are and help move them to where they need to be.
Yeah.
And it's true, isn't it?
Yeah.
Whatness, or dealing with issues and positions, leads to static and fragmented spirituality. Religion without recognizing personhood. Whatness alone defaces the image of God that is relational reality. God is into relational reality. Whatness becomes an outward journey. In other words, always dealing with the what, the position, the issue. Becomes an outward journey, and you know where it ends? Are you ready for this? This will tell you a lot about society. It ends in addiction and detachment. We need teachers and leaders in the church who are orange peelers, not orange splitters. That deal with the interests, not the issues.
Yeah.
Now let me explain this. I don't want you to not get this, so I'm taking time to explain it. When I was at another church that was a large church and had all types of different ministries, and I was over a department, whenever you needed a room for an event, you had to go to the facilities manager. You have that in one church as well, but this was a larger church than one church, and there was more activities, and so sometimes you'd have to go to the facilities manager 2 or 3 months in advance to secure a room. And so let's just say, it's when I was over a Bible school, let's just say that we were going to be having a recruiting Saturday where we had invited students and we had invited parents to come to hear about the school. And so I wanted the fellowship hall. So I would call the facilities manager and say, could we have the fellowship hall on such and such a date, such and such a Saturday, from such and such a time? And they said yes, and they put it down. So time was getting close, and we set up the people we needed to. We got together all the stuff we needed to set up, all the people that were going to help us set up that morning, and we drive in on that Saturday morning, and it's evident something else is going on in the fellowship hall because a buzz of activity is going on. So I get out of the car and I go see what's happening, and it's a volunteer appreciation brunch. Now I can do one of two things. I can jump up and down and say, I've got this room. And guess what the other leader's going to be doing? I got this room. I scheduled it first. No, I scheduled it first. And we can fight to where one wins and one loses. And we also lose relationship.
Yeah.
Or I can sit down with the other pastor and say, okay, we do have an issue here, but let's talk about our interests. What have you got going on here? I've got a volunteer appreciation brunch. So do you need the kitchen? Yes, I need the kitchen. And the kitchen's right there in the fellowship hall. How many people are you going to have come? About 300. Well, it's good. This is the only place you can put 300 people. I, on the other hand, do not need the kitchen. And I'm only going to be having about 75 come. So I get on the phone, I call the facilities manager. I'd say, something happened. We're not blaming anybody, but we both thought we had this room scheduled. But we've talked it through, and I could probably survive in like the prayer chapel. Is it available? Person on the other end says it's available. I said, okay, I'll go there. So I get off the phone. Then I say to the other guy, here's the problem I've got. Number one is I'm going to be having parents and prospective students coming to this door. And I don't have any people to set at this door. You have a lot of volunteers here. Could you set somebody at this door and tell them that when our people get here, our event is now moved over here? Yeah, we can do that. Plus, I've only got enough people to set up here. Now we're going to have to redo everything and figure out everything. Can you give me 3 or 4 more people to help set up? Yeah, I'll give you 3 or 4. What's happened? We dealt with our interests, and we spared our relationship, and both events got to take place.
Look at you go.
I've been doing it wrong this whole time.
But what we tend to do is we tend to stick in our heels in the ground and say, I'm not budging because I did this right. What is that? We get stuck in positions.
So good.
And we not only have a winner and a loser, we have 2 losers because now we have no relationship anymore. Because we fought over it instead of dealt with it. Is this making sense to you?
Yeah.
Can you see how this works in the home as well? Okay.
This stings a little bit, Dr. Chris.
You see what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
And so, as an example, let me give another one that I run into all the time. Not as much as I used to because I don't deal with interns as much as I used to. But
You got a room
All
full
the
of them.
interns.
well, I mean, until recently. Here's something I have found that happens with many interns. They have a heart for ministry. They have a heart to be an intern. And mom and dad are saying, when are you going to get a real job?
Hear it every day.
Why don't you go to a real school? Why don't you get a real job that pays money instead of being at the church and so on and so and you know what happens? This. And bad relationships between the parents and the kids, the parents and the church. Okay? And so I've had interns say to me, My parents, how do I explain this to them? Deal with the interests instead of just the issue. And here's how you deal with the interest. You go to mom and dad after 5 or 6 or 10 or 20 or 30 of these discussions, and you say, Mom and Dad, I understand where you're coming from. I love you, and I know you have my best interest at heart. I know you're not saying this because of any other reason than you want the best for me. And I appreciate that. And I hear what you're saying. But something on the inside of me won't let me go. God's got a call on my life, and I have to follow that call. And I would like to do it with your blessing instead of without your blessing. So I want you to know I understand. Can we at least pray about this? Can we at least, you see what I'm saying? It tones it down to where it's not just the issue. It's the interest. You're sharing with them their interest, and you're helping them know that you understand their interest. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Now, is that going to a guarantee to handle the problems? No, but it's sure going to be a step in the right direction. Okay? So, the daughters responded to mom as the controller or the external authority. Right? The outside in. The moment mom picked up one end of the control stick, her choice to split and not peel the orange, she had to pick up the other stick, which was the consequences. Right? But you can't control people and you can't control consequences. Principles control consequences. People can't control consequences. Principles within are internal authority, inside out, because they allow who-ness to direct whatness. Some of you probably need to listen to this recording again so that you can process it, okay? Orange peelers transform from the inside out. But orange splitters conform from the inside outside in. Orange peelers influence. Orange splitters control. Orange peelers are servant leaders. Orange splitters are codependent, creating authoritarian leaders. Orange peelers are ontological thinkers. In other words, they think in line with relationship. Orange splitters are Cartesian thinkers, having a relationship with parts that define the whole, not the other way around. Orange peelers draw people into oneness by vision making. Orange splitters drive people into strife by crazy making. Orange peelers unlock and loose forgiveness. Orange splitters bind and retain unforgiveness. Orange peelers are into plurality and community. Orange splitters are into singularity and individualism. Finally, orange peelers minister, and they renew the mind from who-ness to whatness. But orange splitters minister or renew the mind from whatness to who-ness. We are how we think. So the bottom line is, if you haven't been able to follow this through, the bottom line is, do you think people or do you think things? Do you think relationship or do you think results? Do you think interests or do you think issues? Here's the problem. We've been programmed to think issues. And I'm trying to reprogram us to look below the issue to the interest. Is this making sense? Any questions or comments?
It's really good.
That's why I say probably some of you need to listen to this recording again, and, and think it through.
Yeah.
Whenever issues, things, positions are higher in your mind than people, you've got a problem.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not saying we shouldn't be results oriented. I'm not saying we shouldn't deal with issues, but we should deal with issues from the interests, because the people are more important than the issue. No questions. Okay. What time is it? Let's see here. Oh my goodness. Do I have time to do this? You know what I may do? I think what I'll do, because of the time, and I don't want to get into the conflict management modes because I want to give it time. So what I think I will do is share a few other things here tonight. And then what we'll do next week is we'll start with taking the assessment, and then we'll go over the conflict management modes. That way I can get the mode sent to Ginny, so she'll have it as well at the beginning of the session. We can take a little while and do it, and then we'll go over the conflict management modes. So let me see where I want to go then for the next few minutes. You got a little more in you, right? Huh.
Really convincing, huh?
Yeah. Let's deal with, this is a long one too, but why don't we at least deal with it a little bit? How anger can become your ally. Instead of destroying you, anger can become your ally. And I don't have time to deal with it in great deal today. Let me just share a couple definitions of anger. Here's one. Anger is a strong feeling of displeasure and belligerence aroused by a real or supposed wrong. Anger is the general term for sudden violent displeasure accompanied by an impulse to retaliate. It's an emotional reaction of hostility that brings personal displeasure either to ourselves or to someone else. Anger may be hidden and held inward or expressed openly. In other words, some people are full of anger, but they never have anger outbursts. Doesn't mean they're not angry.
Yeah.
Some people just let it all out. People think, oh, they're an angry person. But there's a lot of angry people that never let it out. And when they do, they really let it out. So it may be hidden and held inward or expressed openly. It can be of short duration, coming and going quickly, or it may persist for decades in the form of bitterness, resentment, or hatred. The Old Testament is full of scriptures having to do with anger. There are 3 different Old Testament words that are translated as anger. One describes anger as the flaring of the nostrils. One is the stirring up or provoking of the heart. to a heated, angry condition that leads to action. Another Hebrew word is to get hot or to burn with anger. The New Testament has 3 different words, Greek words translated angry, anger. One is wrath or anger as a state of mind, often the purpose of revenge, turbulent emotion, clear to being so angry that one is beside himself or out of his mind. So in examining Hebrew and Greek words, you can see that the Bible acknowledges that anger can sometimes be seen in a positive light as well as a negative one. And so let's look at 2 Old Testament examples from the life of Moses when it comes to anger. The first is Numbers 16. In Numbers 16, Moses attempts to deal with rebellion against himself among the Hebrew people. He identifies greed and ambition as the primary motivators of the rebels. And he becomes angry. And in Numbers 16:15 it says, "Then Moses became very angry and said to the Lord, 'Do not accept their offering.'" Not only does God not rebuke Moses for his anger, but God also becomes angry himself, only relenting from destroying the people because Moses pleads with him to spare them. In verses 21 and 22 of Numbers 16. So God got so angry with the people he was going to destroy them, and Moses then pled with God not to do it. Yet just a few chapters later, we see Moses' anger addressed by God in a totally different manner. In Numbers 20, the people are complaining again about a lack of water. You know the story. Moses seeks God's guidance, and the Lord instructs him to speak to a rock in order to produce water. Instead, Moses disobeys God and strikes the rock in a fit of anger. And for this, Moses was not allowed to enter into the promised land with the rest of the people. So anger can be positive and anger can be negative. And it's a heart issue. Okay? The obvious teaching regarding anger in the life of Moses is that anger itself is not wrong, nor is expressing anger wrong. It's the mode of expression that's important. The way you express it. There's a definite difference between the emotion of anger and the sin of anger. There's a difference between the emotion of anger and the sin of anger. The emotion of anger has been given to us by the Creator and is in fact modeled after His image. He's given us the capacity to respond appropriately to injustice, hurt, and injury. Isn't that true? The sin of anger, on the other hand, is focused on self and promotes the desire for revenge. It festers in our hearts and grows into bitterness. Sinful anger decides to mete out judgment on ourselves or on others rather than leaving the situation in God's hands. So, God gave you emotion. And you are not to deny your emotions. It is not wrong to get angry. In fact, sometimes we need to get angry when we see injustice. We need to get angry. But the emotion of anger is different than the sin of anger. And we are told to be angry and what? Sin not. Anger is a part of God's nature. Isn't that something? Anger is a part of God's nature. So therefore, we cannot conclude that anger itself is bad. God is completely good, completely good, and He's holy. So we have to conclude that divine wrath is also good. Therefore, God provides us with a model to study when we examine how he handled anger. And God's anger is consistent with his love and his mercy. His anger is consistent with his love and his mercy. The purpose of God's anger is always to produce repentance and redemption. It was not motivated by hatred for the offender. It was anger expressed under control. Listen carefully to me when I tell you that everything God does is for redemption. And everything you and I do should be for the purpose of redemption. And so sometimes we get angry. We should get angry. But we should have redemption as its basis. So we can draw some conclusions about the Bible's teaching on anger. Number one, it's possible to be angry without sin, since anger is an emotion created by God for certain adaptive purposes. It is possible to be angry without sinning. Number two, we need to deal with the issues giving rise to anger as soon as we notice we are angry. Do not let the sun go down on your wrath. Now, I'm looking here. We've got two couples that are married in this room. Three? Who's the third one?
Me.
Unless you haven't told me something.
No. You would definitely know.
I'm going to ask you guys a question.
No, you put on blast.
What happens when you go to bed angry?
Wake up angry.
You wake up angry-er.
Not talking. Like
And one reason you wake up angry-er, especially if you're the one who hasn't been able to sleep, is if the other one can sleep.
Which one are you?
I go to sleep. But here's the thing. That's why God said, do not go to bed angry. So the minute you realize you're angry, deal with it. Don't let it fester. The longer it festers, the worse it gets. Okay? Perpetuating anger and not dealing with it creates opportunity for the devil. You give the devil a foothold. And the scripture says, give no place to the devil. But when you hold on to anger, you're giving place to the devil. Number three, not all anger is sinless. Not all anger is sinless. Some human anger inhibits and retards God's righteousness from being displayed in our behavior. Number four, such sinful anger is irrational and pointless. It accomplishes nothing but strife. While I'm on the subject, if you want to have a healthy home, resist strife at all cost. Do not let strife in your home. Kick it out. Do not let strife in your home. In fact, one of the Proverbs says that if you've got strife in your business or whatever, get rid of the person who's causing it, and strife will leave with them. Now, sometimes in a marriage you can't do that. But
Isaiah just told me what's going to be that.
he just said you need to move out. There are times, listen carefully to me, Janie and I are so adamant about this, that there have been times in our marriage when we have gotten so heated and so angry at one another that we finally had to come together and say, we can't let this stay in our home. We have to let it go and just start over as though it didn't happen. Why? Because it was just going to get worse and worse and worse. And strife is a killer. And number 5, self-control is the primary issue here. Now, I'm going to, I think I'll just, I'll quickly give you a few things here. And if you want to talk about them more next week, we can talk about them more. But you want to write these down because these are vital. The Bible offers some specific guidelines for handling anger. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Let me give you 7 guidelines for handling anger. I won't give you all the scriptures. I'll just give you the points. Number 1, avoid people given to anger. Avoid people given to anger. Some people, the anger follows them everywhere they go. Avoid them. Number 2, put away anger. We're talking about the violent, uncontrolled kind. Put it away. Just drop it. Number 3, be slow to anger. Have you noticed that some people are like a fuse, a short fuse? Be slow to anger. Number 4, don't provoke others to anger. Don't provoke others to anger. Number 5, maintain proper control and confess anger truthfully. Maintain proper control and confess anger truthfully. Share why you're angry. See? Number 6. Oh, that's a big one here. Control your thoughts. Control your thoughts. Take no thought, the King James says. Thoughts can come, but you don't have to take them.
Yeah. Ooh,
Right?
wow. That's good.
Cast down imaginations and every high thought that exalts itself against the nature of God, the Word of God. And then number 7, share your anger if it will help build a relationship and express the love of Christ. Share your anger if it will help build a relationship and express the love of Christ. Now I want to give you 5 things that trigger anger. What triggers our anger? This is some good teaching, by the way. Can save your marriage, save relationships, save your ministry. What triggers anger? Where does it come from? Number 1, although it's rare, there are documented cases of anger stemming from biological reasons. Chemical imbalance or something can enter into people walking in anger. So, number 1, it could be a biological reason. And there are times when I've actually had people that could never seem to get over their anger go and get checked out medically. And sometimes we found out what the problem was. Dealt with it. Number 2, here's the second trigger. Injustice. Injustice. Because we're made in God's image, we get angered at unjust situations. Right? And if you don't, you need to pray about that. Number 3, another anger trigger, a perceived threat to your personal worth. A perceived threat to your personal worth. Number 4, when we believe our essential needs are not being met. We get angry when we believe our essential needs are not being met. And number 5, the 5th trigger, is when our strongly held convictions are challenged. When our strongly held convictions are challenged. Is this making sense to you guys?
Too much.
Too much? And like I say, I'm giving you these real quick. If you want to ask some questions on some of this next week, I can elaborate a little more. Okay. You have to own responsibility for your choices and your actions. You have to own responsibility for your choices and your actions. Okay, let me give you the 4 elements of an anger episode. We didn't call them anger episodes in my home, we call them hissy fits. Everybody has their own terminology. But 4 elements of an anger episode. Number 1, every episode of anger begins with an environmental event. Begins with an environmental event. In other words, something happens in our environment that ticks us off. Right? Number 2, each environmental event prompts an internal monologue. We start talking to ourselves. We engage it in our minds. We play mental tapes. We formulate our opinions and things based on our belief system. You know, we say things like, this should have never happened. This internal monologue that's going on. Can anybody identify? Number 3, then feelings and emotions surface. Feelings and emotions surface. And everybody can see it. Number 4, the final stage of an anger episode is comprised of our actions. How we act in the situation. The choices we make about how we will respond to anger triggers are directly related to our internal monologue and our subsequent emotions. What is that saying about our actions? Make sure your monologue is healthy and your choices are healthy. Your emotions are healthy. Let me stop right here and say, and I probably need to teach on this in this class. Just because a person is discipled does not mean they're emotionally healthy. They might know how to read their Bible, pray, tithe, come to church, follow the principles of the Bible. They might be an emotional mess.
Yeah.
And we need to be dealing with emotional health. And if you are emotionally healthy, your internal monologue is going to be healthy. Is this making sense to you?
Yeah.
So we need to spend a lot of time on emotional health, not just spiritual health.
I think emotional health is a really big issue in our society.
It is. There's a lack of it. Okay? So any questions on any of this? I mean, I could give you a whole lot more, but I've given you quite a bit of information.
Yeah.
Any questions right now? I could take 10 minutes worth.
And
Comments?
Put away anger. So Katrina, the other day, no,
Blast her right now.
no, the other day,
Your name's Isaac, right?
no, so she told me
Are you gonna
the
throw
other
me-
day it was a situation between me and someone else, and she had told me, she's like, don't even bring that up because lately I've been bringing up a lot of stuff. So is that like putting away anger,
Is what like putting away?
not bringing it that to surface?
Not if it's still there.
Ooh, that's good. What if I don't?
In other words, to put it away, you have to let it go.
Okay, yeah.
You don't just you let it go. See, a lot of people have a hard time with that. Sometimes I'll teach when it comes to forgiveness. Forgiveness is a choice. Now, I understand it's also a process, right? But it's a choice.
Yeah.
And I can choose to forgive you. Doesn't mean you're worthy of it. Doesn't mean it still doesn't hurt. I just choose not to carry it around. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Because of what I said, they may not be worthy of it. Well, a person can be worthy. What I mean by that is maybe they've come to me and apologized and really heartfelt apologized. But what I mean when I said they may not even be worthy of it is they don't care. That's all I'm trying to say. Okay. So my point is, I can receive it or I can reject it. Those emotions and those feelings. I can keep them or I can give them up. I ran into a situation one time I think I mentioned this in the marriage conference. I ran into a situation one time in a ministry I was involved in where I had been done wrong, just terribly wrong. And it was destroying me. I mean, I was functioning, but barely. And it was destroying me. It was on the inside of me. And one day, Janie said, you got to deal with that. Because if you don't deal with that, it's going to destroy you. And I had to, I remembered The Bait of Satan by John Bevere. And I started watching it and I started reading it. And I had to get to the point where I said, okay, Lord, they don't deserve my forgiveness, but I give it. Because if I don't, it's destroying me. I just give it up. And see, that goes to emotional health. I was raised to not forgive. I was raised to hold grudges. I was raised to feel the victim. I was raised to have pity parties. And emotional health says those aren't right. I have to release those things if I want to be healthy. Does that make sense? So and forgiveness is a choice. Letting it go is a choice. Do they deserve for me to let it go? Probably not. But that's not the point. Listen carefully to me when I tell you that there are some people that are still being controlled by parents or authority figures that are dead and buried 6 feet under. And they're still being controlled by them. Why? They've not let it go. Does that make sense to you? So if you want to be emotionally healthy, you have to take God's word in and let this other stuff go. And hold every thought captive. And not let anger rule your life. You know what the 3 most famous words of angry people is? I'm not angry. Someone will say, why are you so angry? Why? Well, I'm not mad. I'm not angry. They just hold it. You would be better off letting it out once in a while. Because then at least you have to admit it's there. Isn't that true?
Yeah.
I remember that same board member I was talking about earlier. One time I sat him down and I just said, "Why are you so angry?"
I'm not angry.
Yeah. I told you I was going to tell you 2 illustrations of him. I'll tell you the last one and we'll close. I heard again. It was board meeting time. I heard again. He was loaded for bear, and he was mad. So I was getting ready for the board meeting that day, and again, I was loading my guns, and the Lord said, no. He said, here's how I want you to handle it. He said, I want you to go in that board meeting, and I want you to start the board meeting different than normal. I just want you to say that I understand so-and-so is angry, and before we even get to our agenda, I pointed to him, say whatever you want to say, and I will sit here and listen, and nobody else will say a word. We won't interject till you're done. And he ranted and raved for about 30 minutes. And all of a sudden, when he got through, I said, and the Lord helped me. It was, I said, I don't understand why you would feel that way after we've been through this time and time again. How many times do I have to deal with you and your attitude? Why are you so angry? And his head hit the table, and he wept. And he wept in front of all the men. He just wept like a baby for about 10 minutes. And he was a different person. He was just angry. And so it's really all of his concerns are not based on anything but his inner anger. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
But he wouldn't admit he was angry about anything. And by the way, he's also the gentleman that I sent to the doctor because his wife said he's got to have a problem. And if he's got to have a medical problem.
He's got to have a problem.
And if he won't go to I've already told him, he's already sleeping on the couch. And I already told him if he won't go to the doctor, he's going to have to move out. Would you help me get him to the doctor? So I bring him into my office. I tell him that I've had a conversation with his wife, and I want him to go get checked out. That's all she's asking is he go get checked out. And he starts railing on me, and I said, wait a minute. I'm not the one sleeping on the couch. You're the one sleeping on the couch. And he went to the doctor, had a chemical imbalance in his body. The doctor gave him a certain medication. That's not drugs, but it's a certain medication. Totally different guy. And I could tell when he wasn't taking it. It was that drastic of a difference.
Why did you leave him on your board for so long? It caused such a big problem.
Because I hated confrontation. Is what I talked about at the beginning.
Yeah.
It was harder to, but once I learned, then I could deal with him.
But you avoided it, and you helped him walk through
I avoided it at
restoration.
first. Once I got healthy, then I was able to deal with it.
You helped him walk through
And did I
restoration.
keep him on there? No, I eventually got him off there.
Oh, man.
You know.
That's not what I wanted. I wanted to end. You avoided it, and then sunshine and rainbows.
Well, they did.
was healed.
At least I was able to. And okay, final story. Final story.
Sorry, guys.
When we left that church after 18 years, they had a going away banquet for us. They brought in the district superintendent to speak that day, and then they had a going away. I've had 2 going aways like this. I've had 2 times I've retired from ministry.
You're a cheater.
And they had this banquet, and during the banquet, they had an open mic where people could come up and they could share. I knew he'd go up there because he was always the first one to talk. He goes up there, and I'm thinking, oh, Lord Jesus. Don't tell me I'm going to have to deal with him on my last day
To
here.
say how awful you
And
were.
here's what he said. He started by saying, it's no secret that the pastor and I didn't always see eye to eye. And I thought, that's the truth. And then this was his next words. But he's my pastor. And he'll always be my pastor. Because even though we fought sometimes, he buried my daughter. He married my kids. And when my wife was in Stanford and she had cancer and they were taking the roof out of her mouth and everything, and we didn't know if she was even going to make it through the surgery, he stayed with me all night long while she was in surgery. He's my pastor. He'll always be my pastor. And to this day, when I see him, he gives me this big old hug and he loves me.
Wow.
I think I can attribute some of that to the fact that I got healthy. Right?
Yeah.
It's worth it, guys. And we need to deal with the emotional health issue in this class before we leave. So, Father, a lot of material tonight. A lot of things we need to know and we need to understand. Help us be orange peelers instead of orange splitters. Help us understand what causes anger and how to operate in anger in a healthy way. Help us to take these principles and incorporate them into our lives and ministries. I pray your blessing over everybody around this table, and that this week will be a great week of learning and engaging these principles. And we thank you for it, and we praise you for it in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Okay.
I have a question, Dr. Cook.
Yes.
Which party was better?
What?
Which going